Cool. Clay Mowry, welcome to the Astro podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me today.
Good, good. So let's dive straight in. Let's talk about Artemis because everyone's talking about Artemis. This podcast will go out this weekend just before the scheduled launch on hopefully August the 29th. Why is this so significant for NASA and the rest of the world?
Well, it's significant to be going back to the moon. I mean, I'm barely old enough to remember Neil Armstrong stepping on the lunar surface. I was a very young boy, but it was one of those moments where it's kind of etched in time and people's common memories and collectively, I think for the whole planet Earth and this and the human species that going back to the moon is not only symbolic, but in terms of our larger let's say evolution to get become a species that can live off planet Earth to use the resources of space. This is kind of a really key step, and I think it's going to be exciting. There's a whole generation of people that have not experienced, lunar missions, and so I think it's going to be exciting for people. And you can just see that, right, with the rovers and the other
Mm,
missions that have been taking place, the private astronaut missions, all the things that are happening in space now is super engaging and exciting for a whole nother generation of people. I tell people I've been working in space for getting close to 30 years, feel kind of old, that this is the most exciting time in my professional experience in 30 years of being in space. This right now, here today, is the most exciting time.
I agree. Will you be? I know you'll be watching, but where will you be watching from, and how do you think you'll be feeling? Because obviously you've seen a lot of launches in your time, but do you think there'll be a different feeling compared to seeing private companies launch? More significant,
Y-
perhaps.
Yeah, it's. I'm going to be in Washington D.C. Unfortunately, I have a bunch of colleagues that are heading down, but just back from holidays, so got to get back to work, get ready for as the French call it, the rentrée, uh, and get prepared for the IC that's coming up in Paris, the International Astronautical Congress. So I'll be in DC. Launches are always spectacular events to watch. This is, I don't know, how do I want to describe the Papa Bear of rockets? I mean, I've seen in my day several shuttles lift off. Obviously, a lot of Ariane 5, a lot of big, heavy lift vehicles. The shuttle was super impressive. This is going to be even, I think, um, more spectacular given the size of the vehicle and of SLS and that rumble. There's something about big solid boosters as well.
Mm.
The sound quality, a pop, a shape that yeah, I think it's going to be exciting for everyone there.
Yeah. So those boosters, the super heavy space launch system, that's never launched before.
That's right.
Obviously everyone expects and hopes that everything goes smoothly. But with SpaceX launches, sometimes Elon will reiterate the probability of fireworks ahead of major launches. Is this different? Is there sort of more confidence because of the many years of planning that have got to this point? Or is there a sort of technical reason why there's a high level of confidence for this launch?
Well, I mean, obviously, you're always working with, it's a controlled explosion, isn't it? Really, that we're when we work in the launch sector, it's there's always a certain amount of risk that's involved in these missions. This one has been a long time coming, painstaking, if I may say so, and
Mm,
watching the development of this launch system. And it's that there's always an amount of risk there, and I think everyone's crossing their fingers, toes, everything they can cross to make sure that this thing is going to go well. I'm always nervous on launch. I mean, whatever vehicle, whatever time I see it, I'm always thinking about it, and I always have this certain lump in my throat when a vehicle's taking off because I know all the technical elements that go into a complex system of systems, right?
mm,
So it's the propulsion, the guidance, the navigation control systems, all the ground support, the engines, the cryogenics, all the things that are involved in the process that have to work precisely at very high velocities, with precision. And so it is rocket science to use the cliche. It is a really difficult task, and for a vehicle this size and scope,
mm.
this is going to be really a huge event.
It's such an exciting time. Well, switching gears a little bit, I'd like to talk about your career a bit, if that's okay, because you've been
Sure.
a figurehead for the aerospace industry for many people. For young people especially, they aspire to meet and hear from you at events like the IAC next month. Um, what do you think is the main factor that makes you a good leader in the space industry? Because I don't know you that well at all, apart from what I sort of see online, and we've spoken a couple of times in the past, but you sort of come across as a sort of trustworthy pair of hands. And I don't know, is that the right assumption? How, if you could be so modest, what do you think makes you a leader in the industry?
I I I I don't know. It's hard to. That's a hard question, but I guess my just a couple of things. One is, I'm not an engineer, although I have, I think based on my decades of work in, I've got a lot of experience on the technical side. So oftentimes, you'll find me, I'm on calls, I'm talking with people, and they'll say, well, between us engineers, or they'll talk to me like, because I can, particularly when it comes to launch and orbits and, all the things, acoustic, shock environments, center of gravity. They're things I know from the experience that I've worked in and working with a lot of great engineers and absorbing their knowledge base. My background is more economics, business, and a bit on the political side. And so I often think of myself as a bit of a translator,
Mm,
from the technical side to being able to speak with people on the policy making side, just in the general public. Um, and the other thing is, if I can say, I wake up every day kind of amazed that I'm in the job that I'm in. And it's not an imposter syndrome thing. It's just I feel so lucky to work in the business I'm in, with the people I'm in. So that probably comes across. I'm super enthusiastic on what I do, for the people I work with, the industry I work with, and really what is our goal. Every day we wake up, we get to go to work and think about how to extend humanity into space, how to use space to make our lives here on Earth a better place, and hopefully that shows. That there's an enthusiasm for that, there's an excitement about it,
mm.
and I just really love the energy of the next generation that's coming through, and so it's always hard looking for a job, breaking your way into a business, trying to track your career through something. And so I tell people all the time that the best part of my job, the funnest stuff I do, is being able to mentor young people, is be able to talk to them about kind of the life lessons and career lessons, and help guide them. So I try to take good amount of my time to dedicate to mentoring, even though it can take time and energy, and you don't know what you're going to get, right, when you sign up to a mentor-mentee relationship. But I found that a lot of the people that I do mentor and talk to in, organizations like SGAC, I get more back from that than I give into it, right? So it's always an amazing thing. They make me think about my life and my career. They make me think about my decisions. They make me want to figure out how to explain what I do on a daily basis in a different kind of way. So, you kind of, when you start being introspective about who you are and what you do, that's a learning experience, right? So,
Absolutely. That's
yeah.
that's really inspiring. So looking at your career, I'd like to sort of touch on a couple of points. So you were president at Arian-Space. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Correct me if I'm wrong. For
Yeah, right.
good for 15 years. And Ariane was the world's first commercial launch service provider. So founded in 1980, before any other, well, to my knowledge, any other private space companies sort of existed. When you were at Ariane, did you have any idea how the industry was going to evolve? Did you get a sort of inclination that that private companies were sort of moving into the space industry?
Yeah, I mean, back in that time frame when I joined, I had run the Satellite Industry Association. I was the founding executive director before I joined Arian-Space, and so yeah, I had a sense of what was happening in the commercial space sector, which, by the way, predominantly 90 some odd percent of that was communication satellites, and the idea of LEO constellations was just taking hold at that point. There were a number of ventures, Teledesic and ICO and Iridium and Global Star back in the day were launching their constellations. And so you could see this excitement and this really kind of new wave of private capital being invested in the satellite industry. And so being on the launch side of that and being enable those systems to get in orbit was an exciting time. We had the .com bubble burst in the early 2000 period, 2001, 2002 period, and the market really took a dive, and it was really a tough time. In fact, both to be launch or satellite, right? The
Yeah.
capital access to capital dried up. There were a few launch failures there. Some of these companies, stumbled and went into bankruptcy and then had to emerge. So there was a few tough years there when I had started out. But you could see the promise of what these systems could do. You can go all the way back to Arthur C. Clarke, who talked about, what communications satellites could do and would do. He also, by the way, predicted that, ultimately you would have terrestrial systems that would make it harder and harder for satellites to compete, right, for that same bandwidth. I don't think at the time, and I do recall, commercial remote sensing was fairly nascent, but I don't think at the time anybody thought the remote sensing sector would be where we are today. And so when you look at the planets of the world and other entities that are now looking at, synthetic aperture radar and other types of systems in the Earth observation realm. And then the other thing is I don't think anybody really thought about, commercial access to space, a little bit with Dennis Tito and then Anousheh Ansari, but I don't think anybody really thought about that. It was still very expensive. Access to space was very challenging. So, but it was fun to be around Arian-Space back in those days and working with companies like PanAmSat and Rene Anselmo. And if you ever, by the way, it's a fantastic story. Someday somebody should write a book about Rene and PanAmSat and basically going up to compete against Intelsat, the other big international satellite organizations. And he really was an inspiration to a lot of folks. There's still several of them out in the business world now that were, young back in the day working for PanAmSat. They were kind of the fresh upstart company back in the day, and a lot of folks spun out of there and are still around the industry doing great things. So anyways, yeah, it was a fun time. I really loved it. Back in the day, we were flying Ariane 4, really reliable system, had captured a huge amount of market share. I was in the right place at the right time after the shuttle was basically taken out of the commercial sector. The U.S. companies were trying to reestablish Atlas and Delta. And then the Russians were trying to come in with Proton and Soyuz, and the Ukrainians with Zenit, Chinese a Long March. So it was a really very dynamic time, and you saw access to space opening up on a global scale. So it was an interesting point in history, with the fall of the Soviet Union and access there. There's a lot of history lessons there that, here we are 30 years later, and we're watching it actually go back the other way.
Yeah, it's fascinating how the internet.com bubble sort of gave birth to a lot of these figureheads that ended up starting space tech private companies. So speaking of private companies, so Blue Origin, how did you move there? Did they approach you? Did you get a call out the day from Jeff, or had you sort of seen what they were doing and sort of proactively try to get involved?
A good friend of mine, Brett Alexander, had been with Blue as a consultant and then started, Blue was very quiet, I would say secretive, but very quiet company back then. And he and I were having lunch one day, and he said to me, "Would you ever consider leaving Arian-Space?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm always open. What opportunity is it? Tell me what we have in mind." And I was at Space Symposium a few months later, 2 months later, and I saw Jeff Bezos speak on stage. It was the first time I'd ever seen him speak in public, and he was talking about this concept of basically an O'Neillian concept, right? He's basically an O'Neill, Gerard O'Neill, devotee, and he was talking about this idea of going to space to benefit planet Earth, and he put it in such kind of simple, straightforward terms. And I was aware of the concept, but when he really spoke to it, I was like, wow, that's like a very clear, clarion call as to why we're doing what we're doing and how. And we talked about access to space and some other things. And later that night, they said, "Why don't you come over to our reception?" And I showed up a little bit on the early side to chat with my friend, and he took me out back, and I ended up meeting Jeff. And when I walked out of the reception, I called my wife and I said, I don't know if I just interviewed with Blue Origin or not, but I'll be an idiot if I don't take this job, right? Like, nothing's been offered to me yet. So it took a few more months after that for them to make me an offer. And it was a exciting time. When I joined Blue, it was about 500 people, and they were
Mm,
flying New Shepard. There was a team of a couple hundred engineers and technicians, scientists that had built New Shepard, and they had just started in those test flights. But in fact, they had been at it for a decade before that, developing the propulsion systems, the landing systems, GNC, and guidance, navigation, control. And it was a super exciting time to be there. And the size of the company was such that I got to know everybody in the company. Um, and New Glenn was just kind of a thought, and they were trying to drive to some other things. And I got to see the company go from 500 people to well over 5,000 people in my time there. So exceptional, extraordinary growth, major milestones, and then working on those first early human flights, suborbital flights for astronauts was a really thrilling experience for me. I really enjoyed it a lot.
that's so interesting. I appreciate you've only just left there and you probably haven't had much time to reflect, but what what sort of attracted you to their mission of millions of people living and working in space? And do you think that their goal of lifting all heavy machinery off Earth is that vision a bit ahead of its time? Do you think that they'll be going more down the sort of space tourism route for a number of years, or are we going to see things moving very quickly,
Oh gosh, I
relatively
mean,
speaking?
so I guess to answer the first part of that, which is they're definitely not ahead of their time. You have to learn, and what they're doing with New Shepard is learning how to launch, how to land, and how to do it repeatedly. And you've got to go through that curve. And SpaceX has done the same thing, right? And I don't know their numbers are astounding now, right? With Falcon and Dragon now, but you have to. It's a steep curve, and in the launch business, generally if you fly 10 times a year, it's a lot, right? And now
Mm,
SpaceX has shattered that record. Blue Origin's on their way to doing that, getting the system operational. They need more vehicles, right, in the fleet. And that they're going to be building. I think they're having a flight coming up just a day or two from now, with another new booster that they'll be flying. So they've got to get up that curve, and everything they're doing with New Shepard will translate to New Glenn and then other vehicles down the road, right? That they're going to fly. And so, um, I think people maybe mistake this idea on the suborbital side that and there's a lot of criticism out there, and flying billionaires, and it's joyrides, and it's not orbital, and they take a lot of to me, unwarranted criticism, right? Because
yeah.
what they're doing is establishing a new market. They're learning how to fly and how to do it repeatedly and quickly and lower the cost of access to space. Those are all huge drivers for where we want to go in terms of lifting, like you said, machinery and factories, and we need, space stations and factories. And if we're gonna actually go out and utilize the resources out there, we've got to solve the transportation problem at the front end. And so they're taking everything from New Shepard and putting it into New Glenn. It's actually almost in some ways more difficult to land a small booster like that than a big, more powerful booster
Right.
in New Glenn. So no, I don't think they're. I think it's absolutely valuable what they're doing. It's going to open up new markets and capabilities. They're already doing microgravity research on board. There's a program called Suborbital Crew that NASA's venturing into to allow principal investigators, that's like scientists from anybody in the U.S. government with a government badge, could build an experiment, go and fly it on New Shepard, and use that microgravity research time. And then, I always think of it too as a step, kind of a stairway. I mean, you start with suborbital, you go to orbital, LEO, to the moon, to Mars, and other planets. And so
Mm,
it's just like everything else. You don't start from 10 feet from the finish line. It's going to take
of
a while.
course.
And I'll say this about Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin is that, to me, his superpower is his long-term vision. He's able to think 20, 30, 40 years ahead. And I'm just amazed by his foresight, his ability to invest in something, knowing that the return's going to come way, way, way down the road. But it's really important to start with the building blocks now: the propulsion, the landing systems, all those key technologies that you have to get good at. Right? So,
Absolutely. I think they're doing an incredible job. So let's talk about your current role at Voyager as Chief Revenue Officer. So I think you've been in that role for about 6 months or so.
Yeah,
Um,
about right.
so what is a chief revenue officer? Does that mean that you're heading up fundraising, or does that mean that you get to spend the
Yeah.
money, or is it a mixture of the both?
It's funny that you ask because I joke about it sometimes when I'm speaking with people, and I actually looked it up the other day. I spent about half an hour looking up the definition of it, and I actually wrote an email to my team, and I said, So I lead the business development, sales, marketing, strategy. I do quite a bit on the international side. I work a lot with Jeff Manber, who's our vice president, excuse me, our president for international and space stations. And um, but I wanted my team to be very clear, kind of, because roles and responsibilities within any swim lanes, as they call it, within any organization are important. I also believe firmly that any team that you're leading, right? I ascribe to this. As a general manager, you have to have a plan. You got to build a team. You got to communicate your plan to the team, and then you got to go execute the plan. And so you got to have a plan. And so I'm explaining my plan to my team. Like, here's why we're here, what we're going to do. So my job right now, we have 6 operating companies in the Voyager family across a broad range of technology areas. And our job is to grow those companies organically, grow the top line for us. What does that mean? It's and by the way, people confuse the difference between sales, business development, and marketing, right? Which to me, they're all intertwined. They all kind of work together. In big organizations, there's very clear lines between those three, but in smaller organizations, it bleeds over quite a bit. And so I explained to them what we're doing, how we're doing it, implement it. So I'm not the chief operating officer. That's Matt Good, who's maybe got a tougher job than I do in some ways because he's got to actually make trains run on time and see the products go out the door. But our job is to go out and develop the markets, position the products in those
Mm.
markets, um, and actually look at synergies between that. I hate the word synergy is always overused. Let's find technology from one of our companies, say Altius Space Machines, that does electropermanent magnets, and marry it with a technology from one of our other operating companies like Space Micro. Put those together. Now we actually have a much more compelling offer that we can put together to go solve some technical problem or bring a new product to market. So it's a fun job. I mean, I get to go work across all 6 operating companies, work with their executive teams, work with their business development sales teams. I spend a lot of time on the road, going to see them and going to see customers, and then developing metrics and how do we measure success and developing the strategy. How do we develop markets, build the pipeline, work with our customer community, make sure we're delivering what I call end to end. So it's making sure from the first contact to actually deliver the product, what that customer experience looks like from their side, and making sure that we're meeting their needs and goals, and we're positioning ourselves to be leaders in the different sectors where we compete. So it's a fun job.
Nice.
It's a bit of a problem solving job every day. Trying to because the companies all have different levels of expertise, maturity, different,
Yeah,
personalities, histories. So you kind of got to switch gears. Sometimes some of them are quite, say, large. So some of these companies are 100 people, others are a few dozen people. So then you got to realize, well, I'm dealing with a smaller company and they might not have the capability here. So we need to support them in these other ways.
absolutely.
So, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so, so, I mean, it sounds super interesting, but looking at an example, so you Voyager acquired Nanoracks earlier this year. Um, is that because there was a resource or a capability there that Voyager saw that could be useful for some of its other business arms, or was it just Nanoracks on its own, just to be scaled and
So
using that as an example, what was the
Yeah,
attraction to
so of our
acquire?
6 companies, Nanox perhaps the most famous, and that's because they've been operating on board the International Space Station for a dozen years, founded by Jeffrey Manbar, who's a pretty dynamic, passionate visionary for space. And the Nanox piece, right? So let's see, I think it's been about a year since we brought them into the family of companies, and they, in that time frame, won this commercial LEO destinations (CLD) contract from NASA, the largest of the 3 awards. Nanomex, this smaller company going up against Blue Origin and Sierra Space with Orbital Reef and Northrop Grumman. So pretty proud of that win. We're partnered with Lockheed Martin on that. But the idea is to build a private space station. So that's, by the way, one of my responsibilities is helping to build now a private space station, or maybe more than one space station, by the way.
Is
So
that Starlab?
that's Starlab, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well,
Starlab,
tell me about Starlab, because
yeah.
I understand there is a Starlab on the ISS at the moment, but this would be a separate new station.
We,
Is that correct?
so what we have on board the ISS today is something called Bishop. Bishop is an airlock. It was the first piece of private operating hardware, and I say that because obviously there's the Bigelow beam structure that's up there, but we're literally actually using it. And just a few weeks ago, used it to do waste disposal. I'm not allowed to say trash, right? We did a trash run from the space station. We
Yeah.
did responsible waste disposal. That's what I keep telling my team. Because right now with the visiting vehicles and there's limited capacity for that. But the Bishop Airlock can also launch satellites. It can do payload experimentation to the robotic arm. The Canadian arm attaches to the Bishop Airlock. There's experiments inside that humans can manipulate, or we can put satellites for deployment, or in this case, a crash mission with a big container that then is ejected from the airlock. But it can be used for multiple purposes. But we invested in that, built it privately, we launched it to the space station, and now it's operational. So that's huge for us. And it goes back to this experience of having 12 years of operating, launching payloads for over 35 nations, and literally hundreds of spacecraft that have been deployed from the ISS by our NanoRacks team. So that gives us a lot of experience about how to operate in space and how to do it commercially, and work with commercial customers all around the world, interface with them, prepare their payloads and missions, fly them to the ISS, and then in some cases return some of the systems and experiments. We're also capable of doing that as well. So that operational capability, we want to be a human space company. We want to operate a private space station. So Starlab, the system that we're designing now, is a private space station. It's about it's a little more than a third, about 37% of the volume of the ISS today operationally, about two-thirds of the power, but it would be done in a single launch. So we're looking to launch that station before the end of the decade, and then have service that NASA can buy, that other space agencies can utilize, and private companies can utilize in space to do research, development programs. And so, you see the commercial crew and cargo programs on the ISS today. That's kind of the roadmap that NASA wants to use. Phil McAllister and his team, Kathy Leaders, to buy that space as a service. So they want to get out of the business of trying to operate this massive space station hardware platform on their own, working through the intergovernmental agreements, and turn that over to commercial providers. Hopefully, really lower the cost of operating in low Earth orbit, and get that return, and have us, do the systems and put them up and operate them efficiently. And they just buy space as a service. Obviously, they're going to certify for the safety and other requirements that NASA has for their astronaut program. But we're really excited about it, and excited about working with them and working with Lockheed Martin and other. We'll be working. We got lots to talk. I can't say anything. We're getting close to the IC, but hopefully we'll have some announcements we can make. And our business model, if I may say, is a little bit probably different than some of the other operators that are out there. We're using a science park business model, George Washington Carver Science Park, and we've got some announcements coming on that. But really what we want to do is open access for research, do it all around the world. So I've been working with space agencies now all around the world, and with the NanoRacks team, and with Jeffrey Manber and Dave Marsh. And we're talking to space agencies down to some small countries, which you wouldn't even expect want to have a program in space, working with their universities, their space agencies, space offices, their private sectors, to be able to build on a science park model. How can they utilize space and access to space? And we can start with the ISS today for research programs and development programs, and then we can move it to Starlab, and then ultimately go on to the lunar surface and beyond.
Fantastic. Such an exciting project. As if you weren't busy enough, as you say, you're also the new incoming president-elect of the IAF, the International Astronautical Federation, which I'm very excited about because I think you're going to do an amazing job. Pascal also, she did a fantastic job. How do you want to take the reins of the organisation forward? I noticed that the IAC has got a lot of focus on sustainability this year. Is that something that you've sort of championed, and what's your priorities for the IAF for your tenure?
Yeah, so first of all, it's humbling to follow Pascal in this role, and before her, Jean-Yves Le Gall, who was by the way my boss way back in the day at Arian-Space. But they're two amazing individuals, and I'm standing on their shoulders as I take the reins of the organization. But Pascal, having led the organization through the COVID years, which is tough, by the way, right? It's an
Of course.
organization built on trying to bring people together, and all of a sudden you can't bring people together because of COVID-19. So she did an amazing job leading us through really probably one of the tougher times, for the organization, trying to transition online and keep the organization financially and operationally in line. And Christian Feicher, who's the executive director in Paris, has done an amazing job as well. So um, it's also fun to take the reins during this exciting time of space, right? So like, there's so many things going on that makes it super fun to be working on these projects. So I have three kind of goals, for the organization. So I start a 3-year term in September in Paris. We're going to be going to Paris for the IC this year, then to Baku in Azerbaijan, and then to Milan, Italy, and now we're deciding for the destination after there, and great locations. So my three major goals: sustainability for sure, number one. And when I talk about sustainability, it's sustainability of in space and working for sustainability here on Earth. So it's got kind of two pieces to that. And we talked a little bit about that earlier, about going to space to improve life here on Earth. And it's key. Without the knowledge we get from the data we collect and interpret from a range of satellites and capabilities in space, we won't understand what's happening here on Earth with respect to climate change and other things that are happening, and how we're impacting our planet. And then the sustainability in space of using an environment where now we have a multi-actor space world, right? It used to be the province of really also other nations that were operating in space, but the size and scope to operate in space was huge. Now everything from CubeSats to even launch. Now you've got startups from all around the world that are trying to get into the launch sector. So we have to be able to use space and establish some norms and operational environments there, so that we can all utilize space. We can all profit from space. That we can make space a sustainable and usable place. Second piece is investment. We see an amazing amount of private capital that's being invested now in the space sector. We want to see that continue. So again, instead of it just being all tied to government budgets, and now we see, and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are just two of the examples, but there's a lot of on a smaller scale with small and medium enterprises investment coming into the sector, and we want to make sure that it's a healthy environment for that, and that can continue. And the last is security. And you don't never necessarily think of the IACs about the security aspect of space, but it goes back to the two other pieces. In other words, if you're investing in smaller companies and investing in private capital into space, a multi-actor space world, we have to have those companies being able to operate safely and securely in space, in the space environment. So it becomes even more paramount. You can liken it to the oceans or other places, airspace, where there's operations that have to take place. We need to be able to do that in a way where people can go back and make the investment and do the operations in the right way. And so security becomes an even more important part to make operations in space a secure environment for communities to operate alongside their government counterparts, right?
Fantastic. I'm afraid we're out of time, but I'm looking forward to the ISC next year and hearing more about your plans. So thank you so much for your time today. It's truly an honour, and I'm glad there's people in the space industry, leaders in the space industry, such as yourself, transforming the industry and helping Generation Artemis take the industry forward. So thank you very much.
My pleasure, Ben. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you at the IC.